She used her beauty as a weapon, seducing over 100 military officers to steal a nation's secrets. This wasn't a spy movie. It was the real-life case of a woman torn between duty and a love she never expected. On September 10, 2008, the U.S. District Court in Los Angeles was operating under a level of security typically reserved for the most dangerous criminals or threats to national security. This wasn't an ordinary public trial. To gain entry, citizens and media alike had to submit applications days in advance, undergoing rigorous background checks conducted by federal authorities. On the day of the hearing, the courthouse perimeter was a fortress, swarming with tactical units and local police enforcing a strict lockdown. The reason for this immense security detail was a single woman set to appear in court, Ava Kim. For 7 years, Ava had lived a double life in the United States. To the world, she was a struggling single mother, a defector from the oppressive North Korean regime. But in the shadows, she was a highly effective intelligence operative. The prosecution alleged that she had slept with over 100 U.S. military officers, extracting countless classified secrets and feeding them back to her handlers in Pyongyang. Under the Espionage Act, such crimes are a grave threat to national security, and trials are often held behind closed doors. However, Ava's case was so emblematic, her methods so classic, her persona so compelling, that the government made a calculated decision for a public trial. It was meant to be a stark warning. When Ava Kim finally entered the courtroom, she was a ghost of her former self. The charm and vibrant allure that had been her greatest weapons were gone, replaced by a haunting exhaustion. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. As she began to speak, her voice trembled, a fragile whisper that seemed at odds with the hardened spy she was purported to be. The spectators murmured amongst themselves, finding it hard to reconcile this broken woman with the cold-blooded operative who had compromised national security for years. Before the trial officially commenced, a bombshell had already been dropped. Court records showed that Ava had submitted 2 letters of surrender to the U.S. government. The public was rife with speculation. Why would a professionally trained, ruthless agent confess so readily after being caught? Was this a genuine act of remorse or a calculated ploy to manipulate the American justice system, to make the government lower its guard? Ava was no stranger to the criminal justice system, and the prosecution was taking no chances. The hearing was meticulous. Over the course of 50 minutes, the U.S. Attorney's Office presented 261 pieces of physical evidence, each one a nail in the coffin of her clandestine career, methodically laid out for the court to see. Her story began in 1974 in the secretive state of North Korea. Ava was born into espionage. Both her parents were intelligence agents. Just a few months after her birth, her father was killed on a mission, a failure that cast a long shadow over her family. When Ava was 2, her mother, struggling to survive, remarried a man named Daniel Kim. He too was a North Korean agent, and he became Ava's stepfather. Soon, 2 new children were born, and within this new family unit, Ava felt like an outsider. She rarely felt the warmth of her stepfather's affection, and her mother, consumed with caring for the younger children, had little time for her eldest. This emotional neglect fostered a rebellious and extremist streak in Ava's personality. In North Korea, the children of martyrs receive special treatment. From a young age, Ava never lacked material comforts and received a quality education. She was exceptionally bright, a fact that didn't go unnoticed. In 1988, while in college, she earned the prestigious Double Red Flag Badge, an honor reserved for only the most outstanding students. Her excellent academic record and impeccable family background made her a prime candidate for the state's most elite institution. In her second year of university, she was recommended for and accepted into the Special Forces Military and Political University in Pyongyang. Her formal training as a spy had begun. The regimen was brutal. Ava was pushed to her physical and mental limits, mastering taekwondo, tactical driving, demolitions, and marksmanship. She underwent intense, high-stakes espionage skill training. Her curriculum also included deep dives into the Korean and Japanese languages, preparing her for future deployments. Her primary targets were designated as South Korea and Japan, but the training was universally applicable. Beyond basic language, she meticulously studied regional dialects, local customs, geography, and even culinary habits. She learned to blend in, to become a chameleon. After 3 years of grueling training, the innocent, bright young student had been forged into something else entirely, a beautiful, decisive, and cold-hearted field agent. By 1992, Ava Kim was on the verge of graduating and officially starting her espionage career, but fate intervened. During a final training exercise, a terrible accident left her with severe, lasting injuries to her brain and leg. The diagnosis was devastating. She was no longer physically qualified for active fieldwork. 3 years of relentless effort, of molding herself into the perfect operative, had been for nothing. Though her heart rebelled against it, she had no choice but to accept a medical discharge and return to civilian life. Ordinarily, a retired North Korean agent would enjoy a high social status, provided with a comfortable home, a car, and a generous pension by the government. This was the life Ava was supposed to have, but it was now a shattered dream. To make matters worse, in 1994, a catastrophic famine swept across North Korea. Even in the capital, Pyongyang, people were starving to death in the streets. Thrust back into civilian society, Ava found she had no practical skills to support herself. Too proud to seek help from her stepfather, she was forced to rely on government food aid. But as the famine worsened, the aid dwindled. Weeks would go by without a single distribution. The constant, gnawing hunger drove her to desperation. She banded together with friends and began planning heists, stealing food from state-run supermarkets. Despite her injuries, her training gave her an edge over ordinary people. Her early successes in theft filled her with a perverse sense of accomplishment, but her luck eventually ran out. During one robbery, she was caught and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Upon her release, her criminal record made it impossible to find legitimate work. With no other options, she fell back into her old ways, reuniting with her crew to commit more sophisticated thefts. In 1996, while stealing precious metals from a factory, they were ambushed by police. In the ensuing chaos, her friends were caught. But they created a diversion, allowing Ava to escape in a truck loaded with 5 tons of stolen zinc. In North Korea, stealing valuable state-owned metal was a capital offense, even for a single kilogram. 5 tons was a death sentence. Ava knew that if she were caught this time, she would spend the rest of her life in a prison camp, or worse. In a desperate gamble, she took a portion of the stolen zinc and smuggled it across the border into China. Posing as a refugee fleeing the famine, she spent 2 years hiding in a small town in Jilin province. She sold the zinc for a substantial sum of money and, with her characteristic grit, started a small business. For a time, she lived a relatively comfortable life, free from the worries of food and shelter. But Ava was alone in a foreign country, consumed by loneliness and a sense of helplessness. She constantly thought of her family and friends back home. She began to devise a plan, hoping to send letters to her family, pleading with them to intercede on her behalf. She clung to the hope that the North Korean government might show leniency and allow her to return. What Ava didn't know was that from the moment she crossed into China, she had been on the radar of North Korea's intelligence network there. The Bureau hadn't forgotten about their brilliant but disgraced former student. They saw an opportunity. For 2 years, they watched her. They saw that her refugee status was now firmly established and accepted by Chinese authorities, yet her loyalty to North Korea remained intact. The leadership of the secret police, known as the Directorate, believed the time was right. They sent an agent to make contact, offering her a way back into the fold. Continue to live as a refugee in China, but this time as an active spy. Since the Great Famine of the 1990s, a steady stream of North Koreans, unable to endure the poverty and political oppression, had been escaping the country. Many of these defectors, including high-ranking government officials and businessmen, were labeled traitors by Pyongyang. South Korea, believing itself to be the sole legitimate government on the Korean peninsula, welcomed these defectors with open arms. The North Korean regime, however, would never allow this to go unchallenged. They dispatched agents tasked with hunting down these defectors and forcibly repatriating them to face imprisonment, labor camps, and other brutal punishments. After rejoining the Directorate, Ava's first assignment was to track these defectors in northeast China. From 1999 to 2001, she excelled. Leveraging her established refugee identity and her superb professional skills, she provided Pyongyang with the names, locations, and details of over 100 defectors. Almost all of them were subsequently captured and dragged back to North Korean labor camps. During this period, her handlers discovered one of Ava's most significant assets. She possessed a boldness that was completely at odds with traditional North Korean women. Shaped by a childhood with little discipline, she held a liberal view of sexuality that was uncommon in her culture. During her time on the run, she had already traded her body for help from a man. While gathering intelligence on defectors, she instinctively used her beauty as a shortcut. To Ava, these were merely transactions, a means to an end. This open, pragmatic approach to sex was something many other female agents lacked. Combined with her naturally petite and charming appearance, which many men found irresistible, the Directorate realized she was destined for a much bigger stage, the United States. In October 2001, Ava received her new orders: infiltrate the United States. Her operational contact and handler for the mission would be her own stepfather, Daniel Kim. After receiving the command, she immediately began to lay the groundwork. To gather information about life in America, she proactively approached a Korean-American businessman working in her region of China. They quickly established a relationship, and Ava got the intelligence she needed. However, she soon discovered the businessman had no immediate plans to return to the US, meaning she couldn't use him as her ticket across the Pacific. Seeing he had lost his strategic value, she found an excuse to break up with him. Shortly after the breakup, Ava discovered she was pregnant. As she prepared to terminate the pregnancy, she was stopped by the Directorate. Her handlers saw the child not as a complication, but as an asset. A baby would provide the perfect cover, making her seem more sympathetic and less suspicious. Following their advice, she carried the child to term. With a newborn baby, she now had the perfect backstory. Presenting herself as a Chinese-Korean national, she joined a dating service and was introduced to a Korean-American man. He was instantly captivated by Ava's feminine charm and tragic story. They slept together, and just 1 month later, Ava informed him she was pregnant with his child. She insisted they move to the US and get married. The unsuspecting man, believing he was doing the right thing, readily agreed. He never suspected a thing. Once Ava had married him, secured her US residency, and given birth to her daughter, she promptly filed for divorce. Now a legal resident with a young child, Ava began to execute her primary mission. Her objectives were twofold. First, obtained the identities and locations of high-profile North Korean defectors in the US, with key targets like Minister Cho, a former secretary of the North Korean Workers' Party, and Jacob Lee, a defector community leader. Her orders stated that assassination was on the table if necessary. Her second objective was to steal military and intelligence secrets from the US government. Ava calculated that the identity of a North Korean defector would be far more useful for infiltrating the highest levels of American society than that of a simple divorced single mother. She voluntarily approached the FBI, claiming to be a recent defector from the North. She spun a tale of escape and persecution, expressing her hope to start a new life with the help of the US government. The United States has always been relatively lenient with North Korean defectors. After verifying that her story contained no obvious falsehoods, her application for permanent asylum was approved. She immediately contacted her stepfather, Dan, who funneled funds to her. With this money, she established a seafood trading company, a legitimate business that would serve as her platform to climb the social ladder. In the nexus of power and money, a successful business is a powerful tool. It wasn't long before Ava Kim, the beautiful and brilliant entrepreneur, carved out a place for herself in the upper echelons of the Korean-American community. Gradually, more and more figures from military and political circles took notice of her. Some politicians sought her financial support. Many others, high-ranking officials among them, were simply drawn to her beauty and sought a more intimate relationship. Ava willingly obliged anyone and everyone. She skillfully used her body as a key to unlock secrets, trading pillow talk for classified information. Periodically, she would use her seafood business as a cover to travel to China, where she would pass the intelligence she had gathered to her directorate contacts. In 2004, she was given an assassination assignment: eliminate 2 South Korean agents operating in the US. She procured a hypodermic needle and a potent poison. But on the eve of the operation, Pyongyang had a change of heart. They concluded that an assassination, if traced back to her, would blow her cover. Ava was far more valuable as a trap agent collecting intelligence than as a one-time assassin. The mission was scrubbed. Ava continued her work, perfecting her methods. Posing as a lonely divorcee, she used dating services to connect with a steady stream of military personnel and political aides. If any target proved resistant, she would deploy her charm and sexuality to win them over. Ultimately, she used her body to obtain information from over 100 American soldiers and officers, all of which was dutifully sent back to North Korea. Her final and most significant target was Captain Alex Park. He was a young officer, only 25 years old, who managed military secrets and information on North Korean defectors. He was relatively immature and inexperienced in matters of the heart. Ava repeated her well-honed tactics and soon began living with him. Fearing that the older, more sophisticated woman might feel insecure in their relationship, Alex doted on her. He catered to her every whim. When she expressed a desire to see restricted military aircraft, he agreed without hesitation. Ava had him completely under her control. Through Alex, she finally got her chance to strike at her primary targets. She obtained the personal information and addresses of Minister Cho, Jacob Lee, and others. Minister Cho, the former North Korean Labor Party official, was one of the most important defectors ever to reach the West. He was under tight protection by US Marshals. Getting to him directly was nearly impossible without an introduction. So, Ava set her sights on a different defector, Jacob Lee. He was the leader of a defector organization and had frequent, close contact with Minister Cho. The security around him was less stringent. With Captain Park's help, Ava arranged a private dinner with Jacob Lee. Throughout the meal, she was alluring, flattering him, doing everything possible to please him. She plied him with alcohol, trying to lower his guard. After several rounds, Jacob was visibly intoxicated. Ava, whose alcohol tolerance had been honed through years of practice, remained perfectly sober. Seeing her opportunity, she moved closer to him, her intentions clear. Under the combined influence of alcohol and beauty, Jacob was momentarily swayed. Seizing the moment, Ava proposed to him, her price being a meeting with Minister Cho. But even in his intoxicated state, something felt wrong. Jacob Lee had been in the US for years. He was no stranger to attempts by Northern agents to approach him. None had ever succeeded. His sense of self-preservation was high. As soon as his internal alarm bells went off, he pushed Ava away, called the waiter to pay the bill, and put her in a taxi home. The mission was not only a failure, but it had also aroused Jacob Lee's deep suspicion. She knew she couldn't risk another move. Jacob later contacted Captain Park and shared his suspicions about Ava. The truth was, Alex wasn't entirely oblivious. A fellow defector had previously warned him about Ava, questioning why she was asking about military intelligence. As a soldier, he had his own private assessments about her true identity. But love can be blinding. He was so deeply in love with Ava that he chose to ignore the red flags. He didn't care about her identity or her motives. He just wanted her to stay with him. He used his access to information as a way to keep her by his side. He confessed this to Ava, telling her that she was under suspicion as a spy, but that he would help her cover her tracks. Hearing Alex's words, Ava felt a flicker of something unfamiliar in her heart. It was the first time someone had stood by her unconditionally, but to her, the tender love of a young man was a fleeting, trivial thing. The fact that Captain Park was so deeply in love with her was simply the perfect opportunity to infiltrate the US military even further. Ava knew that the military often invited North Korean defectors to serve as security instructors, lecturing soldiers on the political, economic, and cultural realities of North Korea. Captain Park was the officer in charge of this program for his region. Ava pressured him to add her to the list of lecturers. It was an incredibly dangerous move. If she were discovered by military intelligence, she would face intense scrutiny, and her spy identity would undoubtedly be exposed. But Ava subscribed to the old adage, nothing ventured, nothing gained. To get the intelligence she needed, she had to take the risk. From November 2006 to May 2007, Ava delivered lectures on military bases to American soldiers. In her speeches, she cleverly used film clips and songs to praise North Korea, disseminating Pyongyang's political propaganda under the guise of an educational briefing. Simultaneously, she absorbed a massive amount of information about the US Army's readiness and operations. Her bold and frequent activities did raise suspicions, but Ava never underestimated the power of her beauty. She used her body to bribe and silence several officials who questioned her. The dissenting voices were quashed. Her exceptional success led the directorate to give her a new assignment: travel to Japan and gather intelligence there. She repeated her old tricks, arranging dates with Japanese men, and traveled to Japan 3 times to collect information. But years of relying on Captain Park's protection had made her reckless. She was leaving a trail of clues. The US government was closing in. During her mission in Japan, she was finally flagged by US intelligence. Her years of purposeful dating and suspicious activities had formed a damning picture. A federal dragnet was closing around her, but she remained unaware of just how exposed she had become. Only when her movements became restricted did she realize she had been compromised. She prepared to flee the US for Japan immediately. When Captain Park learned she was leaving, he offered to go with her, ready to abandon his life and career for her. But it was too late. Before they could finalize their plans, the door burst open. On July 15, 2008, Ava Kim was arrested by federal agents. The arrest of a North Korean honey-trap spy on US soil became a massive media sensation. The press fiercely condemned North Korea, demanding an official response. On September 4th, the North Korean Central News Agency finally addressed the issue. Their statement was a cold, calculated betrayal. They claimed that the woman known as Ava Kim was merely a common criminal who had fled North Korea long ago to escape punishment for her crimes. They labeled her a vile human scum and suggested the entire espionage affair was a fabrication cooked up by her and the puppet U.S. government to slander the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. In a single press release, they disowned her completely. In prison, Ava refused to cooperate. Her spirit was broken. She stopped eating, subsisting only on an IV drip to stay alive. To get her to talk, the FBI brought in a psychological counselor. They showed her the North Korean press release, the ultimate proof of betrayal. They told her that if she confessed and sincerely surrendered, the court would consider leniency. They also assured her that social services would ensure her daughter was well cared for. Perhaps it was the mention of her daughter that reawakened her will to live. Or perhaps it was the chilling realization that the country she had sacrificed everything for had cast her aside like trash. Unable to endure any more physical and psychological torture, Ava Kim broke. She signed a full confession and wrote 2 letters of surrender, expressing her hope that she and her daughter could one day live a normal life in America. Back in the Los Angeles courtroom on September 10, 2008, Ava Kim listened silently as the judge read the long list of her crimes. Her expression remained flat, unmoved. But when she heard that Captain Alex Park had also been arrested for his role in aiding her, her composure finally shattered. Her body began to tremble uncontrollably. Perhaps, in some corner of her heart, she had entertained the fantasy of spending the rest of her life with him. Now, that thought was just a cruel, impossible dream. After an hour-long hearing, as she was led away, tears streamed down her face. On October 15th, the district court delivered its final verdict. For violating the National Security Act, Ava Kim was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. She did not appeal the sentence. 5 years later, the beautiful spy who had shaken the foundations of the U.S. intelligence community was released from prison. She was reunited with her daughter. The U.S. government, true to its word, allowed her and her child to remain in the country. Ava Kim, the agent, the seductress, the traitor, was finally gone. In her place was just a woman, hoping for an ordinary life.